Hey there, night owls and history lovers. Tonight, we're diving deep into the foggy, cobblestone streets of 17th century London, where the scent of fresh bread masked something far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. If you're finding comfort in these historical journeys, a gentle like or subscribe means the world to me. I'm curious, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Perhaps you're tucked into bed in a cozy cottage, or maybe you're in a bustling city, seeking peace in the stories of long ago. Now, settle into your favorite spot. Let your breathing slow, feel your body sink into comfort, and let's wander back through time together, to a place where shadows held. Secrets and kindness wore a different face. You stand at the corner of Pudding Lane, London, 1678. The morning mist clings to the timber-framed buildings like ghostly fingers, and you can hear the distant clatter of wooden cartwheels against uneven cobblestones. The air is thick with the humidity of the Thames, that ancient river that has witnessed countless secrets wash away with its murky waters. You pull your woolen cloak tighter around your shoulders, feeling the rough texture of the fabric against your skin. The wool smells faintly of the countryside, of sheep and rain and simpler times. Around you, London is slowly awakening. A milkmaid walks by, her wooden bucket swaying rhythmically as she calls out her wares in a voice that echoes off the narrow alleyways. Her voice is melodic, almost singing, and you find yourself humming along with her tune long after she's disappeared around the corner. The cobblestones beneath, your feet are worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, each stone telling its own story of the countless souls who have walked this very path. Some stones are darker than others, stained by time and weather and things best left unmentioned. You notice how they seem to glisten in the morning light, as if they're still wet from last night's rain. Though no rain has fallen, the buildings lean inward, their upper floors jutting out over the street like protective guardians watching over the pedestrians below. The wood is dark with age, weathered by decades of London's unpredictable weather. You can smell the history in those beams, the scent of old wood and coal fires, and the accumulated breath of thousands of lives lived within those walls. Window boxes overflow with herbs and small flowers, their green leaves providing the only spots of color in this predominantly brown and gray world. You breathe in deeply, catching the faint aroma of rosemary and thyme, herbs that have been used for cooking and healing for generations. There's something comforting about these familiar scents, something that connects you to the people who tend these small gardens with such care. A church bell chimes somewhere in the distance, its bronze voice carrying across the rooftops and down into the narrow streets. The sound seems to bounce off the walls, creating an echo that lasts longer than it should, as if the city itself is reluctant to let go of the music. You count the chimes, ... 7, ... 8, ... 9, and realize that the day is already well underway. The warm, yeasty aroma of fresh bread begins to drift through the air, growing stronger as you walk deeper into the maze of London's ancient streets. It's a smell that speaks of comfort and nourishment, of family gatherings and simple pleasures. Your stomach responds with a gentle rumble, reminding you that you haven't eaten since yesterday evening. Following the scent, you find yourself drawn toward a particular building, its wooden sign swinging gently in the morning breeze. The sign bears the image of a wheat sheaf, painted in faded gold and brown, and below it, in careful script, the words, Thomas Whitmore, Master Baker. The paint is chipped in places, showing the wood beneath, and you can see where careful hands have touched up the letters over the years. As you approach the bakery, you notice something unusual about the building. While the other shops on the street show signs of the bustling morning trade, customers coming and going, shopkeepers sweeping their doorsteps, apprentices carrying goods, this bakery seems strangely quiet. The windows are clean, almost gleaming, but there's no press of customers at the door. No line of housewives waiting to purchase their daily bread. You pause just outside the entrance, your hand resting on the worn wooden doorframe. The wood is smooth under your palm, polished by countless hands over the years. There's a warmth to it, as if the building itself is alive, breathing with the rhythm of the city around it. Through the glass window, you can see the interior of the shop, softly lit by candles and oil lamps. Shelves line the walls, filled with loaves of bread in various shapes and sizes. The golden crusts seem to glow in the lamplight, and you can almost taste the crispy exterior and soft, warm interior that awaits within each loaf. But something about the scene feels off, though you can't quite put your finger on what it is. Perhaps it's the way the light seems to pool in certain corners, creating shadows that are deeper than they should be. Or maybe it's the absolute stillness of the shop, the way nothing seems to move or shift, as if time itself has paused within those walls. A pigeon lands on the windowsill beside you, its small claws clicking against the glass as it pecks at something only it can see. The bird is unusually plump, its grey feathers full and glossy, and it shows no fear of your presence. In fact, it seems to be studying you with its bright, intelligent eyes, as if trying to decide whether you're friend or foe. More pigeons begin to gather, alighting on the roofline above, perching on the narrow ledges of the building, cooing softly to each other in what sounds almost like conversation. Their voices create a gentle symphony, a background chorus that seems to welcome you to this place. You've never seen city pigeons looking so healthy, so content, and you find yourself wondering, what could possibly account for their obvious prosperity? The door of the bakery suddenly swings open, though you're certain you saw no one approach it from the inside. A small brass bell announces the movement with a soft, melodic chime that seems to hang in the air longer than physics would suggest. The sound is pure and clear, like a note struck on a perfectly tuned instrument, and it sends a small shiver down your spine. "Welcome, welcome," comes a voice from within the shop, warm and inviting as fresh honey. The voice has a quality to it that makes you want to step closer to hear more of its gentle cadence. There's something almost hypnotic about the way the words flow together, each syllable carefully crafted and delivered with the precision of a skilled musician. You step across the threshold, and immediately the world outside seems to fade away. The sounds of the street, the cartwheels, the calling vendors, the clip-clop of horses, all become muffled, as if they're reaching you from a great distance. The only sounds that remain clear are the gentle crackling of the fire in the ovens and the soft cooing of the pigeons outside. The interior of the bakery is larger than it appeared from the street, with wooden beams stretching across the ceiling and disappearing into shadows above. The air is warm and humid, filled with the scent of yeast and flour and something else, ... Something that makes your nose twitch slightly, though you can't quite identify what it is. It's not unpleasant, exactly, but it's unexpected, like finding a minor key in the middle of a major chord. Thomas Whitmore emerges from behind the counter, and your first impression is of a man who has found his calling in life. He's neither tall nor short, neither thin nor stout, but perfectly proportioned for his role as a baker. His arms are strong from years of kneading dough, his hands surprisingly graceful as they move through the air while he speaks. His hair is the color of wheat, streaked with premature gray that gives him a distinguished appearance despite his relatively young age. It's pulled back neatly with a leather cord, though a few strands have escaped to frame his face. His eyes are pale blue, the color of a winter sky, and they seem to see everything without judging anything. "I don't get many visitors this early in the morning," Thomas says, his voice carrying that same melodic quality you noticed from outside. "Most people prefer to send their servants for their bread, or to come later in the day when the gossip is flowing as freely as the ale at the tavern." He chuckles softly, a sound like water running over smooth stones. The flour that dusts. His leather apron seems to shimmer in the lamplight, creating patterns that shift and change as he moves. The apron itself is well worn but meticulously clean, the leather soft and supple from years of use. You can see the care he takes in his appearance, the pride he has in his craft, written in every detail of his clothing and demeanor. "Please, look around," Thomas continues, gesturing with one flour-dusted hand toward the shelves that line the walls. "Everything you see here was baked fresh this morning, before the sun rose, while the rest of London was still dreaming." His voice takes on a dreamy quality as he speaks, as if he's describing something magical rather than the simple act of baking bread. You walk slowly through the shop, your footsteps muffled by the thick layer of flour that covers the wooden floor. The flour crunches softly under your feet, creating a sound like walking on fresh snow. Each step leaves a faint impression, a temporary mark of your passage through this space. The shelves are indeed full of breads of every description. There are round loaves with crusts the color of burnished copper, their surfaces scored in intricate patterns that seem to tell stories of their own. Long, narrow loaves sit alongside small, individual rolls, each one perfectly shaped and baked to golden perfection. You notice that some of the breads are shaped in unusual ways, twisted into spirals, braided like rope, formed into knots that seem almost decorative. When you ask Thomas about these unusual shapes, he smiles and his eyes take on a distant look. "Each shape has its own purpose," he explains. "Some are for sustenance, others for celebration, and a few are for remembrance." The way he says the word remembrance makes something cold settle in your stomach, though you can't explain why. There's something in his tone, a weight to the word that suggests it carries more meaning than its simple definition would imply. You file this observation away in your mind, along with a growing collection of small details that don't quite fit together. "Would you like to see how the bread is made?" Thomas asks, his voice bright with enthusiasm. Most people are content to simply purchase the finished product, but I find that those who understand the process appreciate the bread so much more. Without waiting for your answer, he begins walking toward the back of the shop, where you can see the glow of the ovens. You follow him through a doorway that leads to the working area of the bakery. Here, the air is even warmer, and the smell of baking bread is so intense it's almost overwhelming. Large wooden tables dominate the space, their surfaces worn smooth by countless hours of kneading and rolling. The wood is stained dark in places, and you notice that some of the stains have an unusual reddish tint that doesn't quite match the golden color of flour and yeast. "This is where the magic happens," Thomas says, running his hand lovingly along the edge of the nearest table. The gesture is tender, almost intimate, like a lover caressing the face of their beloved. Every loaf begins here, with simple ingredients transformed through patience and care into something that nourishes both body and soul. He shows you the large wooden bowls where he mixes the dough, the measuring tools worn smooth by decades of use. Everything is meticulously organized, each tool in its proper place, each ingredient stored with careful attention to preservation and quality. There's something almost ritualistic about the way he's arranged his workspace, as if the act of baking is more ceremony than craft. The secret, Thomas continues, his voice dropping to almost a whisper, is in understanding what each ingredient contributes to the whole. Flour provides structure, yeast gives life, water binds everything together. But there's one ingredient that most bakers overlook, one that I've found makes all the difference in the world. He pauses, looking at you with those pale blue eyes, and you find yourself leaning forward, caught up in his explanation despite the growing unease in your stomach. What ingredient is that? You ask, though part of you isn't sure you want to know the answer. Love, Thomas says simply, and his smile is so genuine, so warm, that you almost laugh at your own suspicions. Every loaf must be made with love, or it's just flour and water and yeast. Love is what transforms simple ingredients into something that can truly nourish a person's soul. The ovens dominate one wall of the workspace, their brick mouths glowing red with heat. The bricks are old, darkened by years of exposure to extreme temperatures, and they radiate warmth that you can feel from several feet away. Thomas moves toward them with the confidence of long practice, using a long wooden paddle to check on the loaves currently baking. Perfect timing, he murmurs, sliding the paddle under a particularly large loaf and pulling it from the oven. The bread is golden brown and perfectly shaped, its crust crackling as it cools in the morning air. The sound is musical, like tiny bells chiming in celebration of the loaf's completion. Thomas sets the bread on a cooling rack, and you watch as steam rises from its surface, carrying with it the rich, yeasty aroma that has been drawing you deeper into the bakery. But again, underneath that comforting scent, there's something else. Something that makes your nostrils flare slightly, and your stomach clench with unease. Each loaf is like a child, Thomas says, his voice filled with paternal pride. Born from simple ingredients, nurtured through the rising process, and finally brought to maturity in the heat of the oven. And like children, each one is unique, each one special in its own way. He picks up another loaf, this one smaller and more intricately shaped, and holds it up to the light. The bread is beautiful, its surface scored with delicate patterns that seem to tell a story. This one, he says softly, is for remembrance. I baked it this morning, thinking of someone who won't be joining us for breakfast anymore. The sadness in his voice is genuine, and you find yourself wanting to comfort him, to ask who he's lost and how you might help ease his pain. But something holds you back, some instinct that warns you to tread carefully in this conversation. Instead, you simply nod, acknowledging his grief without prying into its source. Would you like to try some? Thomas asks, already reaching for a knife to cut the bread. The knife is old, its wooden handle worn smooth by countless hands, and its blade gleams in the lamplight. He cuts a thick slice, and the bread falls away from the knife like silk, revealing a crumb that's perfectly textured and golden in color. You accept the slice, and as you bite into it, you're amazed by the complexity of flavors that fill your mouth. There's the expected taste of wheat and yeast, but also something deeper, something that seems to speak of earth and growth and the mysterious processes that transform simple grain into sustenance. The texture is perfect, neither too dense nor too light, and it seems to melt on your tongue. It's extraordinary, you say, and you mean it. Whatever your growing suspicions about Thomas and his bakery, there's no denying that he's a master of his craft. I've never tasted bread quite like this. Thomas beams at your praise, his entire face lighting up with pleasure. Thank you, he says. It means more than you know to hear that. So few people truly appreciate the craft anymore, the care that goes into each loaf. They want their bread fast and cheap, without understanding that the best things in life require time and patience and dedication. As you finish the bread, Thomas gestures toward a window that looks out into a small courtyard behind the bakery. Would you like to see my garden? He asks. It's not much, but it provides some of the herbs I use in my baking, and it's where I use, seeming to search for the right words. It's where I find my peace. The window is old. Its glass thick and wavy, distorting the view beyond into something that seems almost dreamlike. Through it, you can see a small, enclosed space surrounded by high brick walls. The courtyard is paved with the same cobblestones that line the street, but these seem older, more worn, as if they've witnessed more than their share of the city's history. Thomas opens a door that leads directly into the courtyard, and you step outside into the cool morning air. The contrast between the warm, yeasty atmosphere of the bakery and the crisp freshness of the outdoors is immediately noticeable. You breathe deeply, and for a moment, the strange undertone you've been noticing in the bakery is washed away by the clean scent of morning. The courtyard is larger than it appeared from the window, with high walls that block out most of the sounds from the surrounding streets. The silence here is profound, broken only by the soft cooing of pigeons and the distant sound of church bells. It feels like a sanctuary, a place apart from the bustle and chaos of London life. And then you see them, the pigeons. There are dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, perched on every available surface. They line the walls, cluster around a central fountain that trickles softly in the morning light, and carpet the ground with their grey and white feathers. You've never seen so many pigeons in one place, and certainly never seen any that look so well fed and content. These birds are nothing like the scrawny, bedraggled creatures you typically see scratching for crumbs in London's streets. Their feathers are glossy and full, their bodies round and healthy, their movements languid and satisfied. They show no fear of you or Thomas, merely acknowledging your presence with mild interest before returning to their various activities. Beautiful, aren't they? Thomas says, his voice filled with genuine affection. They've been coming here for years, ever since I first opened the bakery. At first, it was just a few birds, drawn by the crumbs and scraps I'd throw out. But word spreads quickly in the pigeon community, and soon I had a whole flock, calling this place home. He walks among the birds, and they part before him like water, not fleeing but simply making room for his passage. Several of them flutter up to perch on his shoulders and arms, and he speaks to them in soft, gentle tones, as if they're old friends catching up after a long separation. "Good morning, Duchess," he says to a particularly large female with iridescent neck feathers. "And how are you today, General?" he asks, a male with distinctive white markings on his wings. You realize that he's named them, these pigeons, and that he knows each one individually. It's both charming and slightly unsettling. This level of intimacy with what most people would consider nothing more than flying rats. But watching Thomas interact with his feathered friends, you can see the genuine care and affection he has for them. "They're excellent company," Thomas continues, gently stroking the head of a pigeon that has settled on his wrist. "Better than most people, if I'm being honest. They don't judge, They don't gossip, they don't make demands. They simply accept what you give them and offer their presence in return. In the center of the courtyard stands a large wooden bucket, and you can see that it's filled with what appears to be scraps of bread and other food. The pigeons take turns approaching it, eating their fill before making room for others. There's a social order to their feeding, a hierarchy that seems to be respected by all the birds. What do you feed them? You ask, curious about what could possibly account for their remarkable health and apparent contentment. Thomas's expression becomes thoughtful, almost secretive. Oh, the usual things, he says. Bread scraps, of course, though I make sure to give them the best quality. Seeds, when I can get them. Sometimes leftover pastries that didn't sell. He pauses, looking directly at you. And sometimes, special treats. The way he says special treats makes your skin prickle with unease. There's something in his tone, a careful neutrality that suggests he's choosing his words very deliberately. What kind of special treats? You ask, though part of you doesn't want to know the answer. Well, Thomas says, his voice taking on that dreamy quality again, they're omnivores, you know. People think of pigeons as seed-eaters, but they'll consume almost anything if it's presented properly. Meat, for instance. They're quite fond of meat, especially when it's properly prepared. A chill runs down your spine at his words, and you find yourself looking more closely at the birds around you. Their beaks, you notice, are clean and sharp, and there's an intelligence in their eyes that speaks of creatures who have experienced more than just seeds and breadcrumbs. The way they watch you, heads tilted slightly to one side, makes you feel like you're being evaluated, measured, perhaps even judged. Where do you get the meat? You ask, trying to keep your voice casual. Despite the growing alarm in your chest, Thomas doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he walks over to a section of the courtyard that's partially hidden by a small wooden shed. Come here, he says. I want to show you something. You follow him reluctantly, every instinct telling you to turn around and leave. This place immediately, but curiosity and a strange compulsion to understand what's happening here keep you moving forward. Behind the shed, you find yourself looking at a small garden plot, carefully tended and obviously well maintained. The soil is dark and rich, almost black, and the plants growing in it are some of the most vibrant and healthy you've ever seen. Herbs of every description flourished here: rosemary, thyme, sage, and others you don't recognize. The leaves are deep green and glossy, and their scent is so intense it's almost overwhelming. This is where I grow my seasonings, Thomas explains, kneeling down to examine a particularly large basil plant. The soil here is ... unusually fertile. Everything I plant grows better than it should, faster than it should. I've never seen anything quite like it. You kneel beside him, and as you do, you notice that the soil has an unusual smell, rich and loamy. Yes, but with an undertone that makes your stomach clench. It's the same smell you've been noticing in the bakery, that metallic, organic scent that doesn't quite belong with flour and yeast. What makes the soil so fertile? You ask. Thomas's hands, you notice, are working in the soil without any gloves. And there's a reverence in the way he handles it, as if he's touching something sacred. Compost, he says simply. I believe in recycling everything, wasting nothing. Food scraps, organic matter, anything that can be returned to the earth to nourish new growth. He picks up a handful of the dark soil, letting it run through his fingers. Death feeds life, he says, his voice soft and contemplative. It's the most natural thing in the world, really. Nothing truly dies, it just transforms into something else, something that can continue to give and nourish and sustain. The philosophical tone of his words is at odds with the chill that's spreading through your body. You find yourself staring at the soil, wondering what exactly has been composted to create such unnaturally fertile ground. The pigeons, you notice, seem to avoid this section of the courtyard, giving it a wide berth as they go about their business. The pigeons don't come over here, you observe, trying to keep your voice steady. Thomas glances up at you, and for just a moment, you see something flicker in his pale blue eyes. Something that might be amusement, or perhaps something darker. They're smart birds, he says. They know when to stay away from certain areas. Animals have instincts that people have forgotten, instincts that keep them safe. He stands, brushing the soil from his hands, and you notice that his palms are stained dark. Shall we go back inside? He asks. I have some fresh pastries that I think you'd enjoy, and I'd love to hear more about what brings you to my little corner of London. Back inside the bakery, Thomas leads you to a small seating area near the front window. 2 wooden chairs sit beside a small table, and the morning light streams through the glass, creating patterns on the flour-dusted floor. The chairs are old but comfortable, their seats worn smooth by countless customers who have sat here over the years. Thomas disappears into the back room for a moment, and you find yourself alone with your thoughts and the growing collection of disturbing observations. The smell, the overly healthy pigeons, the fertile soil, the strange undertones in Thomas's carefully chosen words individually. They might be explained away, but together they form a pattern that makes your skin crawl. You look around the shop more carefully now, searching for additional clues to confirm or dispel your growing suspicions. The shelves of bread, so appealing just moments ago, now seem somehow sinister. The golden crusts that once looked so inviting now make you think of Thomas's words about special treats and properly prepared meat. Your gaze falls on a shelf behind the counter that you hadn't noticed before. It's partially hidden in the shadows, but you can make out a collection of small objects arranged there with obvious care. From your position, you can't see exactly what they are, but something about the way they're displayed suggests that more than just casual decoration. Thomas returns, carrying a wooden tray laden with pastries that smell of cinnamon and honey. I baked these this morning, he says, setting the tray on the table between you. They're a specialty of mine, sweet rolls filled with fruit and nuts. The recipe has been in my family for generations. The pastries are indeed beautiful, golden brown and perfectly shaped, with a glaze that catches the morning light. Steam still rises from them, carrying with it the rich scent of baked goods and spices. Under normal circumstances, you would be delighted by such a treat. But now you find yourself hesitating. Please, try one, Thomas urges, his voice warm and encouraging. I don't often have the pleasure of sharing my baking with someone who truly appreciates the craft. He selects a pastry and takes a bite, clearly savoring the flavor. Perfect, he murmurs. The fruit is just sweet enough, and the nuts add exactly the right amount of texture. Reassured by his obvious enjoyment of his own creation, you take a pastry and bite into it. The flavors explode on your tongue, sweet and rich, with layers of taste that speak of skill and care in the preparation. The fruit is perfectly cooked, the nuts crunchy, the pastry itself flaky and buttery. It's extraordinary, and you find yourself momentarily forgetting your suspicions in the simple pleasure of eating something so delicious. This is incredible, you say, and you mean it. I've never tasted anything quite like it. Thomas beams at your praise, his entire face lighting up with pleasure. Thank you, he says. It means everything to hear that from someone who understands quality. Most of my customers are in such a hurry, they barely taste what they're eating. They grab their bread and rush off to their busy lives, never stopping to appreciate the love and care that went into every loaf. As you eat, Thomas begins to tell you about his life, his voice taking on the rhythm of someone who rarely has the opportunity to share his story. He speaks of learning to bake from his father, who learned from his father before him, a tradition stretching back generations. The Whitmore family has been baking bread in London for over 100 years, he says proudly. We've weathered plagues and fires, wars and famines, always providing nourishment for the people of this city. There's genuine pride in his voice, and you find yourself drawn into his story despite your lingering unease. He tells you about the early mornings, rising before dawn to begin the day's baking, the satisfaction of seeing his ovens full of rising loaves, the joy of knowing that his work would feed families throughout London. But Thomas is already on his feet, moving with surprising speed to position himself between you and the door. Oh, but you haven't seen everything yet, he says, his voice still pleasant but with an undertone that makes your pulse quicken. I have so much more to show you. The real treasures of my collection, the ones I don't share with just anyone. Your hand is on the door handle, but Thomas's presence so close to you makes you hesitate. He's not threatening, exactly. But there's something in his posture, in the way he's positioned himself, that suggests he's not going to let you leave easily. Perhaps another time, you say, trying to sound polite rather than panicked. I'm afraid there might not be another time, Thomas says, and now the mask of pleasant hospitality is beginning to slip. You see, I've developed quite a fondness for you over the course of our conversation. You're exactly the type of person I've been hoping to meet, intelligent, curious, appreciative of quality craftsmanship. The type of person who would be missed. The word missed hangs in the air between you, loaded with implications that make your blood run cold. You think of the collection of personal items, the stories of customers who died under tragic circumstances, the overly well-fed pigeons in the courtyard. The pieces of the puzzle are clicking together in your mind, forming a picture so horrifying that you can barely comprehend it. Let me show you the basement, Thomas continues, his voice now carrying a dreamy, almost hypnotic quality. That's where I do my most creative work, where I experiment with new recipes, new techniques, new ways of nourishing my community. You pull on the door handle, but it doesn't budge. Thomas notices your growing panic and smiles, and for the first time, you see something genuinely frightening in his expression. I had the lock changed recently, he explains. Too many people wandering in at inconvenient times. Now I can control exactly who comes and goes. Your mind races, searching for options, for ways to escape this situation that seems to be deteriorating by the moment. The windows are too small to climb through, and besides, they're probably locked as well. The back door leads to the courtyard, but that's enclosed by high walls with no obvious exit. You're trapped, and Thomas knows it. Don't be afraid, Thomas says, and his voice has returned to that gentle, caring tone that first drew you into his shop. I promise you, what I have planned is beautiful in its own way. You'll become part of something larger, something that will nourish and sustain long after your individual concerns have faded away. He moves closer, and you can smell the flour and yeast on his clothes, but underneath that, the metallic scent that's been bothering you all day is stronger now. You see, he continues, I've discovered that the secret to truly exceptional bread isn't just in the ingredients or the technique, it's in the personal touch, the special ingredient that makes each loaf unique, memorable, nourishing in ways that go beyond simple sustenance. Your back is pressed against the door now, and Thomas is close enough that you can see the pale blue of his eyes has darkened to something approaching grey. My customers don't just buy bread from me, he whispers. They become part of my family, part of my craft, part of my legacy. And you, my dear friend, are going to become my masterpiece. The pigeons, you gasped, the horrible realization finally crystallizing in your mind. You've been feeding them. Thomas's smile widens, and there's genuine pride in his expression. They're such efficient creatures, he says. Nothing goes to waste with them. Bones, gristle, the bits that can't be used in other ways, they consume everything, leave nothing behind but their grateful songs. He reaches out as if to touch your face, and you flinch away. And the best part, he continues, is that they're so well fed, so content that they never leave. They've become part of the ecosystem I've created here, part of the cycle of nourishment and renewal, just as you will become part of it. The full horror of what Thomas is describing washes over you like a cold wave. The special ingredients in his bread, the unusually fertile soil in his garden, the healthy pigeons, the collection of personal items from deceased customers. It all fits together in a pattern so monstrous that your mind struggles to accept it. You're insane, you whisper, though even as you say it, you know it's not entirely true. Thomas isn't insane, he's something much worse. He's completely rational, completely in control, completely at peace with the horrific acts he's committed. Insane, Thomas repeats, and he seems genuinely puzzled by your reaction. I prefer to think of myself as practical. I've simply found a way to honor my customers in death as I honored them in life. They continue to nourish people, to bring joy and sustenance to the community. What could be more beautiful than that? Thomas reaches into his apron and withdraws a small cloth, and you can see that it's been soaked with something that makes the air shimmer slightly. This will help you relax, he says, his voice gentle and soothing. I find that my guests have a much more pleasant experience when they're not fighting the process. You try to dodge away from him, but there's nowhere to go in the small space near the door. Thomas moves with the practiced efficiency of someone who has done this many times before, and as the cloth covers your nose and mouth, you catch a whiff of something sweet.